Walking into a British home in the 1990s meant stepping onto carpet that assaulted your eyes. The hallway floor was almost always covered in patterned carpet, typically featuring swirls, florals, or geometric designs in browns, oranges, and deep reds. This wasn't a subtle pattern either. It was bold, busy stuff that seemed designed to hide every possible stain from muddy shoes and wet umbrellas. The walls were equally dramatic, papered in loud floral prints or geometric shapes that competed with the carpet for attention. A lot of these patterns had this weird optical effect where staring at them too long made your eyes feel strange. You'd often find a dado rail running horizontally along the wall, splitting the decoration into two sections. The woodwork was usually stained a dark mahogany brown rather than painted. Doors featured frosted glass panels with swirly designs, and most were made of that dark wood that seemed to attract every bit of fluff and dust. Against one wall sat a small telephone table, complete with a chunky rotary phone or maybe an early push-button model with that distinctive ring. Coat racks were essential because British weather meant you always needed somewhere to hang wet jackets. The living room was the beating heart of the 70s home, and you could tell the moment you walked in, everything revolved around the TV set, a massive console unit housed in fake wood veneer, often with actual legs like a piece of furniture. You had 4 channels if you were lucky, maybe 5 depending on your aerial, and everyone watched the same programs at the same time because there was simply nothing else to do. The telly dominated the room, placed where every seat faced it, surrounded by a 3-piece suite, upholstered in bold geometric patterns or swirling florals in browns, oranges, and harvest golds. These sofas were built like tanks, heavy, scratchy, and virtually indestructible. Alongside them sat coffee tables and sideboards finished in wood effect laminate, that shiny printed stuff pretending to be oak or teak. The mantelpiece became a stage for ornaments, ceramic figurines, commemorative plates, maybe a carriage clock, all carefully arranged and fiercely protected from careless children. Shelves displayed family photos in matching frames, and those glass ornaments everyone seemed to own. This was where families actually gathered shoulder to shoulder on that indestructible sofa, staring at the same flickering screen night after night. The telly sat in the corner of the living room like a shrine, massive cathode ray tube humming away behind wood effect veneer cabinets that weighed about as much as a motorcycle. By the early 1980s, if you were doing all right, you had a VCR sitting underneath, probably a VHS model because that's what won the format war against Sony's Betamax. The machine itself was a marvel. You could actually record programs while you were out, assuming you managed to program the timer correctly, which most people couldn't. The instruction manual might as well have been written in ancient Greek, but if you got it working, you could tape Coronation Street or EastEnders and watch them later, skipping through the adverts by hammering the fast-forward button. Video rental shops popped up on every high street, letting you borrow films for a couple of quid. Friday night meant browsing shelves of battered plastic cases, hoping someone hadn't already nicked the good stuff. Then there was the remote control, a chunky brick of plastic that spent more time wedged between sofa cushions than in anyone's hand. Finding it required full archaeological excavation of the furniture. The kitchen from the 70s through to the 90s was built for getting things done rather than looking pretty. You'd walk in and find cupboard doors in wood effect laminate, usually pale oak or darker walnut, that didn't fool anyone into believing it was proper timber. The fake grain repeated every 3 or 4 doors if you paid attention. Worktops were formica, running along walls in cream, beige or speckled patterns meant to hide tea stains and breadcrumbs. This material took years of chopping, wiping and general abuse without showing much wear. Below stretched linoleum flooring, either mimicking tiles or going solid color, wipeable within seconds after inevitable spills. The electric kettle held permanent residence on the counter, always plugged in, positioned beside the toaster which earned its keep twice daily at minimum. Inside some kettles you could see the coiled heating element, whilst others hid everything beneath a smooth plate. The real command center was the tea-making station, that dedicated worktop patch where kettle, mugs, tea bags, sugar bowl and milk lived in close formation. A proper brew could happen in under 2 minutes with minimal fuss. Everything was built to survive, nothing fancy, just worked day after day. The microwave was the centerpiece appliance of the 80s kitchen, a massive countertop box that weighed about as much as a small child and occupied a third of the available workspace. Early models ran at 600 watts maximum and took roughly twice as long to heat something as reheating it on the hob, but owning one was the entire point. The food processor arrived around the same time, a plastic beast with multiple blades and attachments that promised to revolutionize meal preparation and mostly ended up shredding cheese. SodaStream machines turned ordinary tap water into fizzy drinks at home, a minor miracle that involved screwing in a carbon dioxide canister and pressing a button until you heard 3 satisfying burps. The electric can opener mounted to the wall and held cans in place with a magnetic arm whilst a circular blade did the work, completely unnecessarily, but impressively nonetheless. These appliances came in 2 dominant colors, avocado green and harvest gold, shades that manufacturers pushed as modern and earthy, but which aged into something closer to hospital cafeteria. If your kitchen had all 4 appliances in matching harvest gold, you had officially arrived, even if nobody was entirely certain where you'd arrived at. The dining room was that special space most families kept for Sundays and holidays. You would walk in and see a heavy dark wood table, usually mahogany or oak, with 6 or 8 matching chairs arranged carefully around it. The table often had extendable leaves hidden away for when extra guests arrived at Christmas or Easter. Against one wall stood a display cabinet, sometimes called a china cabinet or dresser, with glass doors that let you see everything inside without actually touching it. This is where the best china lived, the stuff that came out maybe 10 times a year at most. There would be a full dinner service with matching cups and saucers, crystal glasses that caught the light beautifully, and perhaps some decorative plates nobody ever ate from. The room felt formal even when empty, slightly stiff and preserved. During the week it might sit completely unused, door closed, waiting. Then Sunday afternoon would arrive. The roast would appear, the good plates would come down from their shelves, and suddenly the room made sense. Everything in there was built to last and chosen to impress guests when it mattered. The 1970s bathroom was where color went absolutely mental. For decades, bathrooms had been clinical white affairs, but by the 70s, homeowners wanted something bolder. Avocado green was everywhere, along with peach, harvest gold, and brown in shades called things like penthouse brown or chocolate. You got the full matching set too, the bath, sink, and toilet all in the same color, plus coordinating tiles on the walls. White was seen as cheap and institutional, something you'd find in a council house, so people spent proper money on these colored suites. The really committed ones went further and installed shag carpeting on the floor, sometimes even on the toilet lid itself with those fuzzy toilet seat covers. These covers came in every color imaginable, often with butterflies or flowers tufted into them, and they were supposedly machine washable, though nobody could work out how to actually keep them hygienic. Bath mats matched the suite color, as did the shower curtains, towels, and even the toilet paper. The whole room became this coordinated color experience. If you visited someone's house and saw an avocado bathroom with matching everything, you knew they'd spent serious money making their loo fashionable. The 80s bathroom was a collection of chunky plastic bottles and aerosol cans rattling around in the cabinet under the sink. Matey bubble bath was still popular, that sailor-shaped bottle promising mountains of foam if you squeezed enough in, though it left a greasy ring around the tub that needed scrubbing out later. Imperial Leather soap sat in its dish on the basin, that distinctive smell clinging to your hands long after you washed them. The bars went soft and mushy if you left them in water too long. Hairspray came in aerosols, massive clouds of stuff that could set your hair like concrete, and the bathroom would reek of chemicals for ages afterwards. Elnet or Harmony were the popular brands, each with their distinct chemical smell. The medicine cabinet held TCP, that brown antiseptic liquid that stung like mad when you dabbed it on cuts, and Germalin, the pink ointment that was supposed to heal everything faster. Savlon was another option, milder than TCP, but just as common plasters, that never stuck properly lived in there too, along with Junior Disprin dissolved in water for headache. Everything had a smell you can still conjure up now, that particular mix of soap and antiseptic and hairspray fumes. The master bedroom was where fitted furniture really came into its own. Most 80s bedrooms had wardrobes that ran wall to wall, floor to ceiling, squeezing every last inch of storage from the space. These weren't freestanding bits you could shift about, They were built directly into the room itself. The doors were almost always mirrored, which served two purposes. One, you could check your outfit before heading downstairs. Two, those mirrors made the room look twice as big, handy given that British bedrooms weren't exactly generous. Inside, you had hanging rails at different heights, drawers for folded jumpers and underwear, and shelves along the top for seasonal storage like winter coats or spare bedding. Dressing tables usually sat by the window if there was room, complete with their own mirror and shallow drawers for makeup and jewelry. Beds came dressed in floral bedding or pastel shades, peach and mint green being especially popular, often paired with a padded fabric headboard, and covering everything underfoot was patterned carpet, typically swirls or geometric designs in beige, dusty pink or mauve tones. Kids' bedrooms in the 80s were personal kingdoms plastered floor to ceiling with identity markers. Walk into any room and you'd immediately know whose territory you'd entered based on the poster collection alone. Madonna glared from one corner, Duran Duran from another, maybe Michael Jackson mid-moonwalk above the bed. Football team pennants fought for wall space with movie posters from films like The Breakfast Club or Back to the Future. Every inch was claimed, usually with blue tack or tape that left ghostly marks when tastes changed. Toys scattered across floors told their own stories. Action Man figures staged elaborate battles while Cindy dolls occupied makeshift fashion shows on dressing tables. Bunk beds dominated shared rooms, creating unofficial territory divisions between siblings who'd argue over who got the top bunk. A cassette player or small boombox sat on a desk or nightstand, mixtapes stacked beside it like treasure. Some kids had Walkmans for private listening, headphones tangled into permanent knots. The whole setup was organized chaos that somehow made perfect sense to the kid who lived there, even if parents despaired at the clutter. The back garden was your private bit of outdoor space, usually rectangular, and big enough for the essentials. Most families had a concrete patio right outside the back door, maybe 2 meters by 3 meters, where you could put a table and chairs. The rotary washing line stood somewhere in the middle of the lawn, that iconic metal contraption with 4 arms that spun round when the wind caught it. You'd peg wet clothes onto the lines and hoist the whole thing up to get them higher off the ground. Garden sheds tucked into corners, simple wooden or metal boxes where you kept the lawnmower, tools, and whatever else needed storing. Some people dug out a small vegetable patch along one edge, growing tomatoes, runner beans, or lettuce in neat rows. When summer rolled around, a swing set might appear on the grass if you had kids, usually one of those A-frame metal ones with a slide attached. Paddling pools came out too, those circular plastic ones you filled with a garden hose. They'd sit there warming up in the sun until the water was tolerable for splashing about in. Most gardens had a fence or hedge separating you from the neighbours. In the early 1990s, computers invaded British homes for the first time. The Sinclair ZX8 out-launched in 1990 for under £100, revolutionary, because until then, computers were giant expensive machines for businesses, not living rooms. The ZX Spectrum followed in 1990 with color graphics and up to 48 kilobytes of memory, plugging into your television through the aerial socket. You switched it on and got a blank screen with a blinking cursor waiting for commands in BASIC. Loading games from cassette tapes meant sitting through several minutes of psychedelic loading screens and high-pitched screeching. The Commodore 64 dominated worldwide, but the Spectrum was Britain's darling, assembled at Teamex in Dundee. Answering machines started appearing, letting you record messages when out, though that flashing light could induce mild panic about what you'd missed. Clock radios with bright red LED displays were another small invasion of electronics into bedrooms. By 1995, 12% of British households owned a computer. These devices brought the digital age into ordinary homes for the first time, even if most people mainly used them for games. If you walked into a typical 80s home, the walls probably weren't just painted flat. Woodchip wallpaper was everywhere, covering up dodgy plasterwork with its bumpy, porridgey texture. You could paint over it in whatever color took your fancy. Above you, Artex swirls and peaks decorated the ceiling, applied with a plasterer's trowel. Patterns ranged from subtle stipples to full-on mountain ranges that cast shadows when the light hit them right. Dado rails ran around rooms at waist height, splitting walls into 2 sections that people often painted in contrasting colors or patterns. Bold geometric shapes and oversized florals competed for attention on wallpapers and fabrics. The thing is, while some folks went wild with these eye-catching designs, magnolia paint was quietly taking over as the safe, neutral choice. This creamy, slightly pinkish white became the default for anyone who didn't fancy making a statement. It went with everything, offended nobody, and slowly crept into millions of homes as the decade wore on. You could slap magnolia over woodchip and call it done, which is exactly what happened in countless living rooms and hallways across Britain. If you opened a British kitchen cupboard in the 1980s, you would find a very different world to what we stock today. Angel Delight was everywhere. That powdered dessert you whisked with cold milk to create a chemical-tasting mousse, strawberry being the most popular despite tasting nothing like actual strawberries. Findus crispy pancakes lived in every freezer, triangular pockets of minced beef or ham and cheese that you grilled until golden, the filling inside scalding enough to burn your mouth. Vesta curries sat on shelves in cardboard boxes, dehydrated meals, promising exotic Indian or Chinese flavors, but delivering reconstituted mush instead. Baked beans dominated tin after tin of them, cheap and filling, and appearing on toast at least 3 times a week in most households. Special occasions meant prawn cocktail and Black Forest gâteau. Whether you were eating at a Burney Inn restaurant or hosting at home, that pink Marie Rose sauce over prawns and iceberg lettuce, followed by chocolate sponge layered with cream and cherries. Ready meals and convenience food ruled the decade because more women were working and microwaves were in half of British homes by 1989. Keeping warm in the 60s and 70s was more complicated than flicking on central heating because most ordinary homes simply didn't have it. Storage heaters were the landlord's favorite because they required no plumbing or expensive boiler installation, but they were absolutely rubbish for anyone who actually lived in the house. The idea was they heated up bricks overnight using cheaper electricity and then released that warmth during the day, which sounds brilliant until you realize most people were out at work all day and wanted heat in the evenings when the thing had already cooled down. Gas fires with fake glowing coal were popular in living rooms and gave off decent heat if you sat directly in front of them, though the rest of the room stayed freezing. Paraffin heaters were portable and cheap to run, but they stank, produced loads of condensation on the windows, and used up all the oxygen in the room, making you feel ill. Houses were drafty as hell because insulation was terrible and single-pane windows let in every bit of cold air, so people stuffed homemade draft excluders under doors and hung heavy curtains everywhere to trap whatever warmth they could manage.